The cockpit's not answering. Somebody's stabbed in business class. I think we're getting hijacked.
What's going on, Betty? Betty, talk to me. Betty, are you there? Betty? I think we might have lost her.
Air France 004, I do not have time to chat right now. Break.
We had to get control of the airspace. We had to get control of the sky.
American 49, you are directed to land in Gander. American 49, you do not understand me. You will not be entering U.S. airspace today.
Is it on every airline? Is it only on a couple? Is it only in the U.S.?
You have been instructed to land. You'll be landing in Gander. Now get your plane in line.
No, U.S. airspace is closed to all traffic at this time. Our only options are Gander and St. John.
US 49, you are directed to land in Gander.
Listen, you're
US 49, you do not
Gander.
understand me. US airspace is closed. Delta 37, you will not be going to Cincinnati today. Break. US airspace has been closed.
My name is Dwayne Pottester. I live in Gander, Newfoundland. It was just a regular day. I got up around 8:30. I think I drove by one of the local establishments there to pick up coffee and probably a breakfast sandwich, and just took my time, came into work. At that hour in the morning, it's very slow. So the guy that was sitting at the sector that I ended up in, he was working the whole airspace by himself.
Okay. She's on mine, Bill.
Hey.
I get in, relieve him, there's nothing going on. You got a few airplanes, but nothing much is happening.
I got this.
However, all the traffic was on its way across the ocean from Europe to North America. We know they're coming.
Gander Center.
My name is Harold O'Reilly, and I was the shift manager on duty during September 11th, 2001. I reported for work. It was a very normal day. Well, it was my 50th birthday, yes. The only thought I had when I went to work that morning was, oh no, what am I going to put up with this evening when I come home? Because usually on a 50th birthday, they always have a party or something, you know, with banners stuck up on the street. And as it turned out, that was the least of my worries that day.
My name is Bruce Terrace. I was the unit operations specialist in Gander Control Tower. Gander Airport was originally a refueling stop and an overnight stop. In particular, during the Second World War, it was very important to allow aircraft to get from North America to the European continent. And it continued that way right up until the second generation, basically, of airliners. When we started to get into the wide-body airliners, not as many airlines had to stop in Gander. And it gradually, as time went on, became less and less needed as the range of aircraft increased. The airport itself is very large. At one time, we had a runway on the airport that was 1,000 feet wide. A normal runway today is 200 feet wide. And at the time, we had a runway that was 10,500 feet long. In Gander, at one point, it was actually an alternate landing site for the space shuttle.
Gander ATC instructs you to turn right, header 290.
My name is Don O'Brien.
Affirmative, copy that.
I'm an air traffic control supervisor in the arrival departure section of Gander Area Traffic Control Center. Gander Air Traffic Center controls a huge chunk of airspace, halfway across the Oceanic to 30 degrees west longitude.
British Airways 1503.
And the flights coming out of Europe They all converge over Newfoundland. We're like the narrow end of a funnel.
Isle en route is domestic airspace that is the eastern coast of Newfoundland. The first radar surveillance sites that aircraft will hit and will be able to be tracked as they come from Europe to North America. So most of these aircraft that we're talking about are wide-body jets carrying numerous passengers, 200 plus, and we are the first to receive them and the radar identify them and send them on their way to their different destinations.
6, you are identified. Say your requested flight level.
The altitude restriction here is 29,000 feet and above, and that's where all these aircraft transition en route back and forth to North America.
We're going to give you airport 22. We're going to get you in there. Like I said, we get a lot.
Normally in the arrival sector where I work, we would have 2, maybe 3 people seated at that time of the day before all hell broke loose.
It's Tuesday morning, and we're back with dramatic pictures of an accident that has happened just a short time ago. You're looking at the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan, where just a few minutes ago we're told that a plane, some reports are that it was a small commuter plane, crashed into the upper floors of one of the Twin Towers.
I was just sitting in the office. One of the controllers came in.
Harold, what's going on? You won't believe this.
Come and see this.
So we go out to the TV room, and I'm watching a replay of the first aircraft, and as I'm watching it...
Human loss. I mean, do you know if there were many people in the building?
Oh, another one just hit. Something else just hit. A very large plane just flew directly over my building, and there's been another collision.
Oh, my God.
It's not a small plane. It's not a small plane. A small plane wouldn't bring that down.
We're going to immediately check with air traffic control here.
And when we saw the second aircraft...
How could that happen?
I think like everybody in the room said, this is not an accident.
What the hell are you doing here?
Now, the guy that I relieved, he came back in the building, in the ACC, and it was sort of like kind of odd, really, and he had a strange look on his face.
It's on TV. Plane just flew into the side of the Twin Towers in New York.
Small aircraft?
They don't know.
And he was talking about airplane hitting the building in New York.
It's going to be a big mess in New York City today.
He was pale, and you could tell that he was in shock. He looked like he was in shock. Like he just couldn't believe that this was happening. We all sort of looked at one another and said, oh my, if these are missiles, we have 400 or 500 coming.
My name is Ben Sliney. I was working for the Federal Aviation Administration in 2001, and I was assigned the position of National Operations Manager. September 11th, 2001 was my first day on the job.
A short time ago, you're looking at the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan, where just a few minutes ago we're told that a plane...
We knew we had a problem that was really beyond our understanding at that point. We couldn't really comprehend what was happening. So when United 175 hit the South Tower, we shut down the entire country. No more aircraft could take off. The next event that occurred was the report of American 77 striking the Pentagon.
We're looking at live pictures of the Pentagon where there is billowing smoke. Jim Miklashevsky just reported that he heard an explosion.
It appears that people here in the building are already describing a highly sophisticated, coordinated attack.
And at that point, I felt there's nothing else to do but to land everyone. We had to get control of the airspace. We had to get control of the sky. As far as we know, there could have been 100 aircraft like this. And all I could think of was, we have all these missiles out there that we have no control over whatsoever.
We have confirmation?
My staff and I discussed endlessly whether or not the military would shoot down American flag carrier carrying American passengers on American soil. I did not think it was possible, and I understand that there was no order in effect at the time to engage and shoot down an aircraft. But it turned out that Vice President Cheney did give an order to engage aircraft after the last hijacked aircraft on 9/11 had crashed.
Harold walked down and looked at me. It looked like he was still formulating the plan in his head. He was like, I can't believe I got to do this sort of thing. And then he tells me,
You got to land these guys.
You think we're gonna land all these guys?
These aircraft have to be landed immediately.
Bring them here. Whatever you can't fit here, Stephenville, Moncton, St. John's. Just keep them away from the big cities.
Okay, I'm gonna land these guys.
One thing I was confident of was the ability of air traffic controllers to handle the unusual. And we have a saying in air traffic control that, good controllers sort it out. They're able to take any situation, reduce it to its component parts, and handle the situation as it develops. I was completely confident of the ability of the Canadians to handle the aircraft, that they were going to be landing, that they would be able to figure out the solution, implement it, get it done.
The potential that any aircraft in the air at that point in time could, in fact, be the subject of a terrorist attack. You don't point the aircraft towards heavily congested, heavily populated areas. You send them to places where if the worst possible thing happened, at least the damage is minimized. That probably doesn't provide much comfort to the people that live here to understand that, but I mean, that's a reality.
My name is Michael W. Ballard. I was a captain of United Flight 929 en route from London to Chicago O'Hare. We were just about halfway across the Atlantic. People are at that point quieting down, reading, taking a nap, passing time however they choose. So it was quiet time back there. I was handed a little ACARS message that comes across via satellite. We can print out messages from the company, and they had sent us a message, which I've saved in my documentation of the flight. Message from Chicago Dispatch. 2 planes have hit the Trade Center in New York City. This is hijacking. Others may be in progress. That simple. Once we realized that there were airplanes involved in a violent act, then you had to make some assumptions. How extensive is this? How safe is my airplane?
Tom, grab the crash axe.
Nobody is going to get past you. Take whatever means you deem necessary, and I'll explain it later.
My name is Natasha Gagarin. I was a flight attendant September 11th. And then I get a phone call from the captain. He asked me, he's like, Natasha, I need to speak with you in the cockpit. And that's not something we usually get. So I go in the cockpit, and he didn't even tell me. He handed me the ACARS message. He couldn't even read it to me. I read it for myself. And I said to Captain Ballard, I said, this is a joke, right? And he's like, no, this is not a joke.
Okay.
When we realize that we're facing an act of violence on a large scale, let's do what we can do. Let's use the resources we have on the airplane to take care of ourselves. Pilots weren't carrying weapons at that time. We might have even talked about using a fire extinguisher if we had to. Squirt somebody in the face, whatever had to be done, whatever it took.
I walked out of the cockpit, took a couple deep breaths. I still get emotional about it to this day. And at the time, I was wearing a cross on my neck, and I just kissed it. I was like, please, dear God, let me get down safely. That's all I ask.
Bird 1503, Gander Tower. You're going to be descending down to 5,000. Expect runway 22. You're playing number 3.
It was all rapid-fire decision-making and setting up arrival profiles. Gander, St. John's, Stephenville, Halifax, and Moncton. There was no favorite airline going anywhere. It was just whatever the logistics worked out to the best advantage of everybody.
Now, I was the person who was the first voice contact with the aircraft in domestic airspace, and I had to deliver that message to each and every one of them. So how am I going to explain this to these guys, and are they going to believe me? Are they going to think that I've lost my mind? It was pretty scary.
Air France 004, you will not be entering U.S. airspace today. Northwest 61, I'm not obliged to tell you anything. Break. You do not understand me. You have been instructed to land. Delta 37, you will not be going to Cincinnati. Due to an event in the USA, you will not be entering U.S. airspace today. You will be landing in Gander.
Gander, Delta 37. We can't get through to our company. We need to stay on our flight plan route.
You don't understand. You have been directed to land. Cleared present position, direct St. John's.
They weren't going into Chicago. They weren't going anywhere. Finally, you got through to them. Okay, well, I guess we're landing.
Gander, ATC instructs you to turn right, header 2. American 49, Gander Center, squat code 2401.
Gander Center, this is American 49 Heavy. Go ahead, American 49.
My name is Beverly Bass. In 2001, I was flying a Boeing 777 as a captain for American Airlines. It was a beautiful day. We even commented when we were over the North Atlantic what a gorgeous day it was.
I'm Mike Franklin. I was the co-pilot on Flight 49 from Paris to Dallas-Fort Worth. As we're crossing the Atlantic, we have one of our radios on what is called Airborne Common.
Say that again, please. Fire at the World Trade Center.
So that would be a means by which aircraft can talk to one another to try to get updates on weather, winds, turbulence, what's happening.
Kennedy Tower reports that there was a...
It was over the common frequency. We heard somebody chirp up that an airplane hit a tower in New York City.
Atlantic inbound aircraft, this is US Air 27. We're receiving word from our dispatch that a plane has flown into the World Trade Center in New York City.
Okay, not necessarily alarming or anything at that moment in time.
You know, we talked about it and we thought, you know, it must have been a small airplane. And then about 20 minutes later...
Something came across the radio again that another aircraft hit a tower, and it was my experience from the military that I can recognize a coordinated attack.
All of a sudden, we start seeing some of the airplanes turning around, making a 180, which you would never see that because the North Atlantic tracks are directional, they're one way, and nobody turns around on them.
And so my first thought was, hey, Beverly, why don't we consider turning this thing around and taking people back from where they came from? She goes, you know, that's not a bad idea. Why don't you see if you can begin that? As soon as I started to pick up the radio, we hear, we're common.
We tried coordinating a return to Europe with Chadwick Control, and they denied clearance.
They're not approving any reversals. And I sat up straight in my seat and began to process. I'm not really worried about what's behind me, like a hijacking type scenario. At that moment, I was truly focused on what my end game was, getting this aircraft and the people on the ground.
Morning, Gander Center. Continental 23 Heavy.
Your radar identified. I have a message for you.
I give him a chance to get something to, write down what his plan was.
There's been some changes to the day if you're ready to copy.
I said, the United States airspace has been closed.
There has been an emergency in New York City.
You now will be landing in Gander or St. John's.
I'll be back to you in 60 seconds for the decision.
But there was no time for them to make a decision. I had to make the decision for him.
There has been an emergency in New York City.
You now will be landing in Gander or St. John's.
I'll be back to you in 60 seconds for the decision.
What did he say? Go again, Gander.
Due to a circumstance in U.S. airspace, you
are instructed to land in Gander.
On a regular day, these aircraft are used to just transitioning airspace and, very, very structured setup. So now they're being forced into an airport where they probably have never been before.
I've flown over Gander 100 times, but I don't actually know where it is.
Continental 23 Gander Center, descend to flight level 290. Expect lower.
Gander Center, roger.
Starting descent into Gander.
Low level. Continental 23 is yours. Continental 23, contact Gander arrival 128.
Continental 23, this is Gander Control. You are cleared to 6,000.
Continental 23 Heavy.
Copy that.
Continental 23 Heavy, you have line of sight. Contact the tower.
128.6.
My name is Glenn Blandford. In 2001, I was working as an air traffic controller at Gander Tower. My job is to get them on the ground safely. I was basically standing here receiving estimates from the guys in the center.
Continental 23 Heavy, Gander Tower. Runway 21, clear to land.
Continental 23 Heavy.
Runway 21, clear to land.
Continental 23 Heavy winds
320 at 3. Plan minimum time on runway and utilize
first available taxiway on rollout. Traffic on final.
A lot of these pilots had never been to Gander before. Some of them had very short notice that they were getting diverted to here, so a lot of them didn't even have the approach plates available or had time to actually study the approach plates and figure out the airport layouts.
I'm Dean King, a tower controller at Gander Tower. I was here watching the aircraft land and then issue the taxi instruction as required on where I was going to park them. Normal procedure is the ground crews would have a designated spot when an aircraft come in. That day, because the ground crew didn't know where the aircraft were going, they said, listen, you send the aircraft where you want to send them, and we'll make sure we're there.
Air Canada 849, give way to the Delta 767.
Speedbird 75. Taxi via Alpha to apron. Monitor ground 121.9.
I just made the plan as I went. They maintained listening watch on the frequency. They just went where I was telling the aircraft to go.
US Airways 27, taxi to the end of the apron.
Hold on. I'll give you further instruction from there.
It was structured so that we would give away the least important pavement first until we started having to actually park aircraft on runways.
Let me work on that for a minute and I'll
And
get
then
back
check
to
with
you.
me on ground once
No, I don't
urgent.
know.
And the determination, of course, at the time was that we would leave the longest runway available as long as possible before we had to start parking airplanes on it.
I'm sure we've got the space, but I don't know. We're gonna have to.
Once he got on the ground, he started asking questions. Can you tell us what's going on? And my response was, I can't tell you exactly what's going on, but obviously it's a catastrophic event.
Once we heard all of the U.S. airspace was closed, we knew that we had to divert somewhere in Canada. So the most likely cities would be Montreal, Toronto, Edmonton, Calgary. You know, we had enough fuel to go to anywhere in Canada.
American 49, I am instructing you to land. Your options are Gander or St. John's.
Hey, Beverly, I asked, why don't we continue flying over to Edmonton if we got more than enough fuel to do so, and then once we refuel and they open up airspace again, we can just fly straight south home.
Gander Center, American 49 Heavy.
And is there any chance that we can continue our flight to Edmonton?
I asked if we could continue and refile to Edmonton.
Normally when we are going to divert, the captain chooses the divert airport. And that day was quite different.
No, I'm sorry. I'm afraid you don't understand.
American 49, you do not understand me. You have been directed to land. I'll be back in 60 seconds. The decision has not been made. I will make it for you.
It was not even up for discussion. It was an order to land in Gander. We normally don't get orders to land somewhere, but that day we did.
Delta 37, you will not be going to Cincinnati today. Break. U.S. airspace has been closed.
No.
Lufthansa 416, you are directed to land in Gander.
28.5.
No, you're not.
Air France 004, what is your choice? Gander or St.
They
John's?
had major issues at the tower trying to park those airplanes because everything is happening so fast. And can we squeeze two more in? Can we squeeze another one in?
In the first few minutes of starting to get estimates of aircraft diverting to Gander, we were getting calls from individual airlines asking if we could accommodate them.
And a constant, like, I'm on the phone to the tower and saying,
How many more can you handle?
I don't know. Let me check.
Dean, how many more can you take?
If we open up a runway, I could take another 15.
15.
it was a constant coordination with the tower. You were on a phone to the tower. You were coordinating with the high-level side as they're coming out of high-level airspace. You have a phone in your hand to St. John's Tower. How many more can you take? Take another 2 or 3. It was crazy morning.
Yes, you heard correctly. U.S. airspace is closed at this time.
Lufthansa 416, you are directed to land in Gander. No, you're not listening to me. There's a crisis in New York, and U.S. airspace is closed.
Runway 21 was the runway that all the aircraft that were diverted in here landed on. Runway 21 runs this direction down here. Everybody landed going this direction, made a right turn on taxiway Alpha at almost to the end of runway 21, and then back up towards the main apron.
Our biggest concern with runway 21 is the fact that at the end of the runway, for the last 1,500 feet, there's no turnoff. You have to do a 180 back taxi to the first turnoff.
We're spacing the aircraft to give us sufficient time to get them off the runway before the next aircraft was final. And in this particular case,
Sabina 539, Gander Tower, follow 747, 1 mile final.
the aircraft in front decelerated a little bit more, I think, than the Sabina aircraft was expecting because he was slower to get off the runway. He wasn't going to be off in time for the Sabina to safely land.
Sabina became in too hot, too heavy.
Oh, we're too close.
Sabina 539.
Go around, fly runway heading, climb and maintain 3,000.
Control, I see him. Ascend 3,000.
Sabina 539, radar identified.
Maintain 5,000. Turn right heading 180.
land in Gander, Newfoundland.
This one up north already.
Perfect. Gander ATC instructs you to turn right. Air France 004, I don't have time to chat right now. Go ahead, American 49.
When I finally plugged Gander into the computer, I realized that I was going to be 7,000 pounds over my max landing weight.
Harold, got a 777 needs to do a fuel dump. Stand by, we'll get back to you.
American 49 Heavy, standing by.
Reg,
Yeah?
can you set up a flight path for a fuel dump, please?
American 49, we're going to set you up with an area near Gander for your fuel dump. Stand by.
Copy that, Gander.
Our mindset is to gas and go and to get home. That's the completion of the mission. But the first step in this mission now has been changed to landing safely and coordinate with the controllers to begin dumping fuel to get down to landing weight.
American 49, contact Gander Center on 131.8 to complete your fuel dump.
American 49, roger.
American 49, Gander Center. For fuel dump, proceed 50 miles due east, send 18,000. Commence dump there.
Copy that, Gander Center. Northeast 50 miles, descend 18,000.
And they started clearing the airspace or making sure that they had a good area to send me to. So they basically just gave me a vector, and that was the heading I stayed on until I jettisoned the 7,000 pounds.
Commencing fuel dump now.
It's high-octane fuel. It's risky business. Explosion, fires, and then you're into a real catastrophic deal if that were to happen.
See this?
So you have to be careful as to how you're maneuvering the airplanes to keep them all clear of each other.
As much as it might shock some people, if you begin to dump fuel at the higher altitude you are, it disperses and atomizes before it actually reaches the ground.
Gander Center, American 49 Heavy.
Fuel dump complete.
Roger, American 49 Heavy. Fly heading 190.
When that was complete, they then vectored me onto a 95-mile final into runway 22 into Gander.
We're getting prepared for the approach and landing, and that takes us down to lower altitude, and so got handed over to Gander Tower. It was interesting that this small base had a line of aircraft on final. It looked like Dallas-Fort Worth on a beautiful summer day at the peak of rush hour. This was not normal.
There was no particular plan in place. There was no time. You just had too much traffic coming that had to be dealt with. Decisions had to be made. There was so much information that you had to take in. It was too much for one person at that point.
We needed people. We went from the 2 or 3 seated that time of the day to 14.
Do you need a break?
No, sir, I'm all good.
We opened 5 sectors. The controllers who were off came in on their own volition. Without being called, they knew we needed people.
Good to see you, Bye.
Good to see you.
They were just purging them out of high-level airspace, the high-level controllers. They wanted to get them out. The pilots wanted out.
You are directed to land in Gander, Newfoundland. You have 2 minutes to comply.
That
It's a
is
visual
a
approach,
negative
runway
Virgin
22.
075. You will not be landing in the United States today. All U.S. airspace is closed to all traffic.
There was apprehension in some of their voices. They wanted to get on the ground as quick as they could.
We're bringing in on a 747 at 22.
This day was intense.
Air France 004, I don't have time to chat right now.
I compared it to a knot that was tightening. But you can't get too emotional about things. Even though you might be hurting, you got to cope with what's going on. You can't just get up and pull your headset out and say, I had enough. They didn't know, but there was more terrorist activity going to happen on their airplanes. Just reflecting on what went on and thinking of what could have went on, you know.
The electronics couldn't keep up to the level of traffic that we had.
446, estimating 1456 Zulu.
So we were doing a lot of voice coordination. The old school of just verbal estimates on which aircraft was where, who was following who. The cooperation of the tower controller and the controllers in Gander Center kept everything straight so that we knew which aircraft was which in the sequence they were for the arrivals.
Confirm visual on the runway. You're cleared for visual approach runway 22.
Gander Control, this is United 929.
Copy that.
Transferring it to tower 158.6.
United Airlines 929, wind 210 at 10. Altimeter 299er2, 1 mile final.
Gear down.
My name is Steven Sircone. In 2001, I was a lieutenant with the Bellevue, Washington Police Department in the Seattle area.
Is this like a layover or something? Yes.
I don't have that much information right now, okay?
We didn't know what was going on down there in the States. Finally, Captain Ballard came over the PA and announced to us that there had been a terrorist incident in the United States. So, think about this without getting too emotional. Then I started to think, well, you know, what's our status here? Who's on our plane? Could they be suspects? And could they be tied to these other terrorists? I didn't know. We had people from all over the world on our plane, and suspicion started to grow.
We had a couple of Middle Eastern gentlemen, I'll say, on the airplane, speaking in a foreign language that none of our people understood. And they were concerned about that.
Gander Tower, American 49, clear to land.
Normally, our final approaches are about 15 miles out, and mine was 95 miles, which made me one of the last airplanes to land. I was number 36 out of 38 wide bodies to touch down that day.
Okay, American 49, I'm gonna need you to pull a 180 and double back down runway 04.
Yeah, we gotta get some extra hands on deck here, because we only got, well, that's what I'm telling you.
We filled up the main apron first, just because at that point we didn't know how many aircraft we were gonna have.
Gander Tower, there's quite a bit of debris out here. Bit of a challenge for an aircraft of this size.
Well, I don't know what you want me to tell you. He's I got nowhere else for you to go.
Virgin 21.
I can see airplanes everywhere. They are all over the taxiways. They're parked on a runway. They're parked all over the area at the terminal. And I didn't know where I was going to be able to park.
There's an old abandoned runway in the middle of the airport that's left over from the Second World War. We parked some aircraft on that. And then at the last dozen or so aircraft that landed were actually parked on what was one of our active runways, because at that point we had nowhere else to put people.
There have certainly been that many airplanes at this airport, even more, but not wide bodies. And that's what was so unique about it, is we were all wide bodies. All the big guys.
Roger that.
That's the last one.
After everything was over, just looking at the radar,
seeing only two aircraft, two military aircraft, one in the west coast of the United States and one on the east coast.
It was an eerie feeling.
It was airy, actually. It was not an airplane in the sky.
You're in a place that's busy all the time, and now there's nothing.
Radar screens were blank. Silence was deafening.
It was almost impossible to believe. It was very touching. See everybody just sitting back with a good job done.
Great job, Harold. Great job.
Well done.
It was quick, a couple of hours of frantic action, and then the airplanes were all on the ground. I've never seen anything like it, and never seen anything like it since.
There's not a plane in the sky right now.
Hey, Harold.
Yeah?
Happy birthday.
Oh, that's right. Happy birthday.
I'll always remember that.
It was never a thought that went through my mind that we could not accomplish this.
I look at it as, you know, a day that we could use as an example of how people just kind of work together and cooperate to get something done.
It was sort of a turning point in life somewhat. For me, it was like before 9/11 and after 9/11. You know, innocent people have been killed. I don't know sometimes where mankind can do what they can do. And then the other side of it all is the good side. They can rise to the occasion and counteract it, and hopefully the good will prevail.